Welcome back to the Freelance Success Summit. Today we have with us the founder of the World Skateboarding Health Foundation. He is also a retail management graduate who overcame chronic back pain and anxiety through his own passion process and has since raised $25,000 for charity through grassroots volunteerism. He's working on a mastermind for turning chronic pain into chronic passion. He has a beautiful story. Let's all welcome Trent.
Hey, thanks, guys. Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to have this conversation again with Julia. And, I love just having these kinds of conversations with Julia too. So I'm glad to get into it.
Well, thanks for agreeing to come on. I know you've been really busy lately with your new project, so it's really great to have you here. You have an amazing story of how you overcame debilitating years of chronic pain through your passion alone. And I know that passion is such a powerful thing, but it's hard for a lot of people to realize how this can be done. And even more amazing is how you now help others to do the same. So, can you tell us about that story and what are the steps in the process that help people? How does it work?
Yeah, so obviously when you kind of think of chronic pain, you think of it kind of limits you in a sense. So for me, the gist of it and the whole idea behind me using the phrase turning chronic pain into chronic passion is because that's exactly what I did, right? That's like the process that I kind of went through. I'm a skateboarder first and foremost, and not till like recently I kind of put the pieces together and like everything just clicked to be like, oh wait, this is what I've done to this point, and this is kind of how it all relates, and this is kind of how that chronic pain turned into this chronic passion, and that keeps me going every day now. So I grew up with scoliosis. I didn't really realize we didn't it wasn't like very noticeable till maybe the age of 8 or 10. And I was a very active kid. I liked sports, soccer, hockey, basketball growing up. So I was a very active kid. Obviously when you're a kid, you don't really have that pain. You don't really have that chronic pain where as kids we're just so we don't I guess have that chronic pain yet, right? We're not adapted to that, right? So just kind of living a carefree life, and then obviously my scoliosis got worse, so it just kept growing. Basically what scoliosis is the curvature of the spine. So my spine just kept curving more and more until it eventually literally looked like an S. And that's at the end when I had surgery. But up until that point, up until the point I had surgery, it just kept growing. And so I went to my local Toronto hospital and to see what we could do. And the doctors, they usually, put the kids in like back braces. It's like it covers your whole back. It's a big bulky thing. It's not too bulky, but it covers your entire torso area. And that, even like my sister got that too because she has a acute case of scoliosis, and that actually helped her. So she wore that for maybe a year or two, and it helped her. But on the other end, me didn't help me. So it was, one, very uncomfortable. Two, it did help me. Like I noticed my spine kind of did feel a little more, my posture was better, and obviously. And I had to wear it at school when I was a kid, and it was very inconvenient to say the least. So unfortunately, a few years later, after kind of testing that out, we realized it was still growing at a pace that this back brace was supposed to kind of slow down, which it didn't. So unfortunately, at that point, we knew like, all right, something's like, this is worse than normal. And it just kept growing after year. We kept track of it every 6 months. Um, and then obviously after the back brace, after a few years of the back brace not working, like I was in high school, and then we had a conversation, be like, hey, my doctors were like, hey, eventually this keeps growing past like a 60-degree point, you're more likely to have surgery. So that's kind of what happened. And then by the time I was 16, I had surgery. And thinking back now, like, okay, so we're at the point where I have surgery, right? So thinking back now, I got into skateboarding when I was about 12 years old, and that kind of overtook my life. That became my passion, right? I was passionate about. I had an interest in sports. I had an interest in like wrestling growing up, all these kinds of sports, but it never really seemed like it never really took over my life as much as a passion would. So that's when skateboarding kind of stepped into my life when I was about 12 years old, and my friends got into it too. And then, it kind of like ruled our lives. And I, stopped doing all the other sports, and I was like, all right, I found the thing. I found the thing that, I can do that I don't need anything else, right? So like, especially with skateboarding, like any skateboarder will tell you, it's it's the most it's the thing you can get most passionate about, like out of anything else. So if someone finds that in their life, like whether that be skateboarding, whether that be any kind of sports, well, especially sports is easy to get passionate and attached to in that way. It just has that nature to it. uh, I think, and especially a lot of people use sports analogies for talking about success or especially passion and stuff like that. It's just easy to relate to in that sense, and especially sports is easy to document. And when you take action in sports, there's a distinct result that you get from that. So that's why it's so easy to talk about that and relate that to success, relate that to courage, relate that to passion, relate that to any kind of value we can instill in our lives. So that kind of I really fell into that passion, and throughout high school. So basically, and that's why I'm looking back now, and I like have pictures of myself when I was skateboarding, and I'm like bending over, and you see like my spine, like, or my back, like curved on my back, almost like a hunchback. And I still kind of have that, but it's just one shoulder blade is deeper than the other. So it's not like a dramatic shift in my state. It's just very significantly, it's still noticeable in my body. But it's obviously not as bad as looking back at my old pictures too, when I'm even like bending over and it's crazy to see. And so yeah, by the time I had surgery, I was 16. My spine was an 80-degree curve. So it's basically like this, and like not I'm being over dramatic when I say that, but it was basically, if I can remember. So I had a double curve. So I had a curve up front and then a curve at the bottom. So basically the curve here was 80 degrees, right? 90 degrees would be like this, right? So I had like an 80-degree curve there. So basically by the time a curve hits like 60, 65 degrees, that's when surgery becomes, the option. So obviously I waited a little bit. I was scared. I don't know, can I curse here?
I'd prefer if you didn't, but
Okay, okay.
be yourself.
I was scared. And I remember even going into like a discussion with my doctor about like how the process was going to go. I almost fainted. I turned white. I like completely fainted almost. I like had to lie down. I'm like, oh my gosh. That was like telling a 15-year-old kid what's going to happen in surgery. So um, it was scary, and it was scary leading up to that. And obviously at that point too, I was um, I had bad anxiety at the same time, so that made it worse. Um, and also, so just going through that, and then we decided on a date for my surgery, and it was funny. We still, like, my family still talks about it to this day. Whenever we kind of talk about that, we were like, all right, we set it for December. So I still had the summertime to skateboard beforehand. And then by the time I healed, I had the summertime to skate afterwards. And my sacrifice was giving up snowboarding season, because I liked snowboarding too, but it was nowhere near the passion I had for skateboarding. Um, so we had that in December of 2016. And oh, sorry, no, when I was 16, so December of 2010. Um, I'm 25 years old now. And yeah, after that, it was a 6-hour surgery. If I remember correctly, obviously they put me under, but I remember just kind of like waking up freaked out, like almost having a panic attack in the middle of it, and then they put me right back to sleep. And like, oh my God, something's going wrong, and then they put me back to sleep. So I remember that, and that kind of put me in a state of anxiety through a lot of it, right? Um, and just that made it worse. So, and I was like focusing on like the worst things that can happen, right? What if something goes wrong? What if I, don't make it? What if all this stuff happens? But deep down, I knew, like, they're professionals. They do this quite a lot, and this is, a 6-hour surgery. So things could go wrong, but at the same time, like, you have to trust them. Um, so after that, it was 6-hour surgery. It took me 6 months to recover. I couldn't walk for a week. I was in the hospital for a week. Couldn't even go to the bathroom for a few days. It was the worst I've ever been. My family's ever seen me. My friends ever seen me. And but after that, got home, was still, bedridden for a few weeks to even a month or so. And let's just say it was the worst kind of physical and mental experience I've had. And that's why I keep it so close to my heart, because it's not just one, it's not traumatic. Like, I don't find it traumatic, but it's part of my story that makes me stronger. It's part of my story that shapes me and how I live my life today. Um, because going on that, obviously, I've kind of battled and was challenged with my anxiety throughout the years too. And high school kind of got better, and then I got into university, and it's very stressful at that point too if you let it. So I didn't have my time management skills together. I didn't have I was a smart kid. I'm a smart kid, but I didn't have certain skills to make me successful all the time, right? Consistently successful. So, like, I didn't have those time management skills, which then led me to feel more anxiety. And then so basically the uh, the the effect and the state of my chronic pain basically was a negative spiral of three things. It was my chronic pain, and then there was stress, and then there was anxiety. So basically, when I got anxiety, I felt stress, which made my pain worse. And the whole cycle. So if I had worse pain, I was in more stress, which gave me more anxiety, right? So it was kind of a vicious cycle in that sense. throughout, even my early 20s. Um, and then I think even like throughout university, I was still skating like on my downtime. You know, sometimes I would go skate before class or after class. And I just remember one time too, I was skating. Uh, Even when I got home and I was skating at my skate park here, and I fell and I hurt my back really bad. So I hurt my back that one time, and it kind of like put me out for a couple weeks. So like I dropped a class because I wouldn't like I didn't want to go to school because like my back was hurting so much. So I dropped a class because I didn't want to go to school for a couple of weeks, or I was missing some classes for a couple of weeks. So I obviously made it up. Like it was just I had to prioritize my health in that situation, um, instead of putting more stress on my body, right? So even like looking back at that stuff now, I'm like the hardest falls, or you know we often fall more when we're not as focused. So when we don't have as much focus, that's when we tend to fall more, and that's when we tend to get hurt more. So same with me skateboarding. I was worried and stressed about school, but I'm also like I need skateboarding to get out this creative outlet, and get out this physical exercise and stuff like that, and just get out all this stuff, right? Get out like my passion. I need to have an outlet for my passion. um, and other than school, right, like I've done projects on like the skateboarding industry as well, but besides that, I need to get out my passion. But I was in that battle between discipline and freedom. I was in that battle between having that discipline uh, and putting that discipline into my time management skills and into my schooling and my education, and then having that freedom with my creativity and my passion, and and really really flourishing and feeling fulfilled with that. So that was the constant battle. So even when I was at school, I was thinking about skateboarding. But then when I was skateboarding, I was worried about school. So that was the constant battle of me being like, all right, now what's like, how is this going to work in my life? Like, how can I not necessarily balance the two, but harmonize them, right? So obviously at that time, I didn't realize that. And that's why over time now, hindsight's 2020 type of thing. So even, when I fell really bad and I hurt my back skateboarding and I missed school because of that, I I was too worried about school to focus on my skateboarding. So, like I said, when I wanted to escape, but I was too worried about my education, I wasn't focused enough on those ideal states and emotions and feelings and fulfillment I get from my passion, skateboarding. So therefore, I'm not focused. I get hurt more, um, and that leads right to that, and that was that battle which ultimately led me to being hurt more, to not getting the most out of my passion and stuff like that. So that's just one example. And then so flashback a few years before that too, 2014. So after I had my surgery, I was back on my board, and I yeah, I was back on my board. So then me and a couple friends, every year, June 21st is National Go Skateboarding Day, International Go Skateboarding Day. So there's like, people go to different skate parks, skate with their friends, or there's like different contests around the city. Me and a couple friends who just want to do something unique and cool, so we skated 20 kilometers in our city, which I think, for translating that to miles, I think that might be like 14, 16 miles or something like that. I'm not too sure. But we skateboarded 20 kilometers down our city, through our city. And the next year we were like, hey, that was cool. We did it again just for fun. And then the next year we are like, all right, something, is sparking us to keep us going. Like, that was our passion, but how can we make this purposeful? So with that, where we went back to our local hospital that helped me, that did the surgery with me, and we were very appreciative. I'm very appreciative that it allowed me to continue to do what I love. And so we I guess partnered with my local hospital and created a third-party fundraising event to basically forward the hospital with this event that we do every year now. And we called it Skate for Sick Kids. And that year we actually did 25 kilometers. So I live just north of Toronto, of the city of Toronto in Canada. So it was just 25 kilometers basically to the city of Toronto. And we skated basically from our hometown to the city of Toronto. It was 25 kilometers. So we did that every year for about 5 years. And last year was actually our 6th year. So throughout that time period, my passion grew. My motto with that was always like, I just have this passion. I didn't really know it was going to turn into a purpose. I didn't really know where it was going to go, right? I didn't really have a purpose for that passion yet. But that's why I'm speaking about this now is yes, there's passion over pain, but it's also about turning that passion, making it a purpose, making it purposeful, and kind of developing that so it leads to a purpose. And the passion itself is kind of like the rock that holds the purpose together. So yeah, over the years with my Skate for Sick Kids fundraising event, we raised more money. We raised more money little bit by little bit. So yeah, and I met new people. I met different organizations that wanted to help. I met different people that wanted to help, different supporters, more people and more supporters, more skateboarders, different crowds that wanted to help. So, and then I met this one guy. I worked at a skate shop 1 year and in the city of Toronto, and my buddy, or he actually, this guy I'm meeting was interested. This guy was interested in what I was doing. So my old boss basically told him about me, because this guy is a local artist in the city of Toronto. So he does some like paintings in the area. And he sets up his local artwork, does like art shops and stuff like that in the area. So that's where the skate shop was kind of located around. So he was in conversation with this artist, and then my boss told the artist about me, because this artist wanted to get more involved in fundraising events and nonprofit initiatives, and bring his art to that world. And at the time I didn't know anything about him, so my old boss made that introduction, and then now we talked, and now we're business partners. So basically I'm like I'm the skateboarder, the guy with the vision that did create this vision, right? I have this vision. I honestly didn't really know where it was going to go, but I had this passion to then be able to create all this vision and think bigger and stuff like that. And then I met this guy, this artist, that is now my business partner, and he he was just very inspirational. He was one so creative because he's an artist, and I also learned he was a filmmaker too. He's a filmmaker as well. So um, yeah, so I learned his story. He also went through um, a very traumatic time as a child. He had a rare intestinal disease at the age of 2 years old, and that was like very hard to make it through, right? And his story is kind of that, and then he used art to cope with that. And he skateboarded a little bit when he was a kid as well. So we bonded over that as well. And he told me about why he does art. He does art to help to show people that it has those kind of rehabilitating powers. It has those when you're in that passion, it's like it heals you and it strengthens your it strengthens you as a person to become more, to take the power back from our pain. And obviously he was very creative, so he turned that into films as well. He kind of used that he did music videos. He did very creative short films as well. He was actually at the New York Film Academy and lived there for a bit as well, and then he moved back to Toronto. So we had a very good creative and visionary approach to our team. We had me as a skateboarder and then him as the like creative director he is now. So within our organization now, the World Skateboarding Health Foundation, we're both executive directors. I'm the operation, I guess the director of operations, and he's the creative director. So we work very well, and obviously we've taken on more of a team. We've built more of a team since then to incorporate and kind of share our strengths in that way. Where I have the vision, the mission, and I know the direction, and then so that's where I can focus my strengths on, and he can focus his strengths on his creative outlets. And he has a lot of I guess he has a lot of connections with people in his industry as well. So he has those connections there in that creative outlet, and just being able to piece things together in a visually appealing way. And then we have, now we have, a fundraising manager and, an events coordinator and stuff like that. So that all came with time, right? At first, it was just me with a passion, and where does that really go, right? So if I'm just going to kind of sum up my story really quickly and how we can translate into talking about how all my story relates to what we're talking about today. So yeah, over the years, I've met all these cool people, met all these really amazing people and opportunities, people that gave me these opportunities. So then we took my small grassroots fundraising event to the city of Toronto. So instead of skating from my town to Toronto, we skated through the city of Toronto, 25 kilometers. And that was just last year, which was, and it grew exponentially from there. Before it was growing incrementally, and we donated a little bit more money per year. Last year it grew exponentially, which is crazy because we not only, and that was, and I only met my business partner, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago at this point, like today. I met him in September of 2018. So and reflecting on that, it's just crazy how things can change so quickly. I definitely wasn't ready for it, and it was a struggle because it made me think bigger, and it made me push my limits. But now looking back on it, it's crazy how things can change, and how facing that fear and facing that challenge head on, it basically forced me to conquer my anxiety when I didn't even have the plan to do that, right? When I was too scared to even do that. Um, because the idea I had before was like, I'm just going to do this, every year regardless. I'm just going to, as a naive kid with a passion, I'm just like, this is my passion. It was very like kind of, I was thinking intrinsically, and I was like, I'm going to do this regardless. This is my thing. Um, regardless of how many people join me, regardless of how much money we raise, I'm just going to do this every year because I'm passionate about it. And then little to my knowledge, that grew to, me being obsessed with growing it. That led to me obsessing about and realizing, the people joining me on this mission, when I initially didn't have the plan to do that, it just kind of grew into that because of how that passion attracted that. So the passion attracted that. And then, I basically had this obligation to the people around me that wanted this thing to succeed. Um, so I became passionate about growing it, about making it bigger, and that's one thing I really credit and always credit to my business partner. Um, he made me think bigger. Like I said before, I was thinking like I'm just going to do this regardless of results. Just going to do this every year because I'm passionate about it. This guy helped me turn my passion into a purpose. He helped me get obsessed about it to a point where I understood the value of this passion to be able to make a bigger difference in people's lives. Because one, I knew it was, making a difference in people's lives because I was, donating to charity. It just, fundraising and volunteerism just has that intrinsic joy, and giving in a sense just has that intrinsic joy. Um, but as a naive kid, I was like, I'm just doing something cool for my community. And then this really opened my eyes to just, it kept pushing. Like it didn't stop at one. I didn't stop at that, right? It didn't stop at, oh yeah, I'm just doing something. I'm just contributing to my community. It didn't stop at that. I was like, all right, I contributed this much to my community, then I contributed this much, then this much, then this much. And then that's what I'm saying. Last year, I contributed like that much to my community. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know I could do that. I didn't, well, I had an idea that I could do that. I just didn't know I could do that so quickly. So that's where, we had this skate. We had, usually when I was doing in my town, it was about, 5 to 10 people. Then we took it to Toronto when it was 50 people. 50 people all skating in a big group together. It was one of the best days of my life so far. And I was very overwhelmed with emotion because that was the first time it was happening. Usually it was very casual, but now it had to be a little more structured. Um, and we had to keep the pack together. It was, as skateboarders, we are very casual in nature anyway. So that's why we understood. So there had to be rules to this. So we really put this passion to the test and put this passion and made it purposeful, and kind of had to challenge ourselves in how to do this in the right ways. And obviously now we're growing to do it bigger and better in the future. Unfortunately, this year with the pandemic and quarantine, we weren't able to do our, Skate for Sick Kids this year, and our other nonprofit, initiatives this year. We kind of did some things online. We've been doing online value workshops. We call them empowerment workshops. But that's besides the point. We're hoping to do that in person as well, but we kind of did that a little bit of that online. So yeah, transitioning out of my story now. We've just been, taking this time to kind of settle and really, we have a plan, and now we know for 2021, we know exactly what to execute. And we're, very confident because now we have the experience and the competence to move forward in the right ways. Before it was crazy, like being able to set everything up in the ways that we did in such a short period of time. Because we did a 25-kilometer skate, but then 2 weeks later, we also did a fundraising gala to continue our fundraising. And that was challenging too, because none of us have done that before. But it was challenging, and it was a little stressful to be able to set it up. But as I mentioned, it was some of the best days of my life so far. And at that point too, so I was working at a Vans retail store, and skateboarding, Vans shoes. Obviously that's where I wanted to be at, right? I was assistant manager there for a bit, and so I was working there, also trying to set up these nonprofit initiatives, and still being able to do more personal and professional development in my own personal life too. So I was taking on a lot at once, but at that time I felt more alive than ever. At that time, I was so immersed in personal and professional development, and I was so immersed in my fundraising and nonprofit initiatives. When before, so getting out of university, I was like, all right, okay, actually go a little bit farther back. As a skateboarder, I was the main thing. One thing I want to kind of wrap up on about my story and about where this leads into, choosing passion over pain and making your passion purposeful is, so I guess when we set goals, right? So as a kid, when I realized skateboarding was my passion, one, I wanted to be a professional skateboarder. Like that's something that kids want to aspire to be. So at that time, that was my goal, right? I didn't know it. I just, when people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, professional skateboarder. So then going through high school, I was like, all right, realizing the limiting effects of my scoliosis. So I was like, obviously it had effects on my skateboarding, and that was like, all right, maybe I'm not good enough to be a professional skateboarder, or it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it to put my body, especially when my body's limited by physical things in my body, not external things, right? Not only external things, I guess. So then I was like, all right, I'll start my own skate shop. So when someone's passionate about skateboarding, there's a few routes they can take. And one is to start their own business, right? So I was like, all right, I'm gonna start my own skate shop. And then going through university, I was, I realized, and, realizing, the intricacies and how businesses work, and how small businesses and larger businesses work, especially going through like a retail management major. And especially talking with my professors too, they're and I always remember this too. One of my professors said it's easier to mess up on other people's time and resources and money than your own. And we were discussing, starting my own business, starting my own skate shop, and in this economy too, I've noticed skate shops aren't doing so well. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, work in the skateboarding industry. So I'm going to get a good job working in the skateboarding industry, and then I had that general goal, and then throughout, my education, I did more research and projects on the skateboarding industry, and then I fell in love even more so with Vans, the company. So I just still to this day, I absolutely it became my dream company to work for, and um, that's mainly because one, they're so successful, yet they stay so tied to their roots of skateboarding. And that's very important to me and very important in all the skateboarders' lives is, gotta stay tied to the roots. And also is very important that the business model, resonated so much and I just fell in love with the business model. So then I was like, all right, after university, after I graduated, um, uh, I was like, all right, I'm going to work for Vans headquarters. I'm going to move to California. I'm going to work my way up and eventually move to California and work at the Vans headquarters. So then continually, and this is meanwhile, I was, developing this fundraising event, my Skate for Sick Kids event. So, and it wasn't until like last year when things really changed so dramatically for me, because I still had that thing where this this passion project that Skate for Sick Kids, and now at our gala last year, um, I've all like over the last few years, there's people that have been planting seeds in my mind and saying like, hey, this is a great idea. You could turn this into a nonprofit. And so, and that was actually the first seed planted by another Toronto skateboarding nonprofit organization. So he kind of told me about that, a little bit about the nonprofit industry and kind of how he went through it. And then he put that seed into my mind. And I never thought of it much. I was like, I could, but maybe later, maybe down the road or whatever, or like I don't even need to. It's just like a passion project of mine.